and welcome back to the 30 Second Success Podcast. I'm Laura Templeton, your host with 30 Second Success. If you've ever wondered how some people seem to land incredible podcast interviews while others struggle to get noticed, this episode is for you. Because building authority isn't about having all the answers, it's about having meaningful conversations with the right people. And today we're talking about podcasting, authentic communication, and relationships, and why your voice matters more than you think. But first, if you're someone who knows you're meant for more, but you've been second guessing yourself, overthinking your message, or struggling to clearly communicate your value, I'd love to invite you to check out the Brand Success Hub. The Hub was created for purpose-driven individuals who want practical support in building confidence, strengthening communication, clarifying their message, and creating more meaningful connections. Inside, you'll find live trainings, visibility, strategies, all powered, AI powered, not all powered. Oh, yeah, I guess it is all powered. AI powered communication support, leadership insights, and mini trainings from incredible experts and guests like the one joining us today. And you can learn more at 30secondsuccess.com/hub. Now, let's jump into today's conversation. Today's guest is Noemi Beres. Noemi is the co-founder of Podcast Connections. For nearly 2 decades, Noemi has helped entrepreneurs and business owners expand their visibility through one of the most powerful forms of marketing available today, podcast interviews. But what makes her work unique is that she doesn't simply help people get booked. She helps them build meaningful relationships, share their stories authentically, and create opportunities through conversations that matter. She's speaking my language, people. Noemi, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on.
Thank you so much for inviting me on your show, Laura. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here today. Yes, I run a podcast booking agency, Podcast Connections, and helping entrepreneurs to share their knowledge, share their stories, and get booked on those quality podcast shows like yours. And that's what I've been doing in the past 6 years. But I've been an entrepreneur since 2007. And I worked in social media marketing, online marketing, content creation. So basically, marketing was kind of my jam in the past 2 decades, which is like a very long time. And it just and I'm enjoying that so much, and also making marketing about relationships, which I think is so important, and not just about sales and business, but creating those amazing relationships all over the world, basically.
I love that. And I think one of the most powerful things, and you and I met because you were actually introducing me to one of your clients who's going to be on the podcast as well. And we had such a great conversation. I'm like, you have to come on the podcast. You have to come on and help people understand how important podcasting is. And you often describe your work as helping experts share their ideas through meaningful conversations rather than simply getting booked on podcasts. So why is that distinction so important?
First, when I started running the podcast booking agency, even for me, it was about get people booked on shows. But as I learned more about the industry, and people like my peers and my mentors told me, you're doing a much more important job than just, quote unquote, getting people booked on podcasts, because you help them to build authority, you help them to build their brand, and creating meaningful relationships and business relationships. It goes over so much in a different way than just getting booked on those shows. And it took me a few years until I understood it. But that's absolutely right. It's much more than just interviews, because I always tell people that the podcast interview is just the beginning of every single relationship that we are starting with just one single conversation. And I think the rest follows if we do it wisely and together, and we support and help each other, the guest and the host.
One of the things that I know that you and I've had conversations around is why conversations are so powerful for building trust. Why do you think that is? Share that with us.
Like in the age of AI, as you also mentioned, like everything is automatized, everything is so technical. So the human touch, the human conversation, the human relationships are getting just more and more important because people will miss that. We can have AI interviews, but that's not the same as having, a conversation like us today. And I think that's one of the main reasons that these conversations are becoming more and more important in the future.
There's so much beauty in that because yes, it is the human connection. One of the things I love talking about is the humanity that we
Yeah.
need to make sure remains intact when we're working with AI. So what kind of opportunities naturally come from authentic conversations in your opinion?
There are plenty of opportunities that I've seen relationships building, I've seen partnerships building, I've seen friendships blooming out of just one single conversation. And it all started with just one podcast interview. And I think it's so important to emphasize that we must keep in touch with the host after the interview. It's so important just to send a thank you note after the conversation ends. And also, I always encourage people to do a post-interview call when we can, get on a call and talk about how we can help, how we can serve each other in the future, because there are endless opportunities out there, but not many people use it. I would love people to share their interviews, to talk about the interviews, to repurpose the interviews, and not just, and many times I see that they just don't do anything with it. And we also talked about this with you, Laura. I remember during our first conversation that, yeah, people just don't share it. And I have no idea why. Because the end of the day, podcast interviews, podcast marketing is a marketing strategy. It's a form of relationship marketing. And it's so important to spread the word, spread the news about our interviews, because yeah, the promotion is everything when it comes to podcasts.
And I find that fascinating that you're absolutely right. One of the things that we have talked about is that people don't there's so much value in the conversations that we have when it's a podcast interview. Even years later, you can find
Yeah,
really good value in a conversation that you've had that you can just share. And I think it brings a highlight to the conversation. It builds your authority, but it also builds the authority of the podcast host. So you're actually elevating them as well. And that again helps to build that relationship. So what advice would you give someone who worries that, that they're struggling with, I'm sorry, that I'm like trying to figure out the words to use here. You talk about sounding, people struggle to sound impressive and it rather than feeling helpful. So what advice would you give someone who's worried about finding their own uniqueness and what they should say rather than just being themselves?
exactly. I mean, what you just said, it's all right. It's not about impress the audience. It's about being authentic. It's like, I know it's a cliche, but be yourself. Like bring your best self, but bring your real self to a podcast interview. I think that's so crucial because so many people try to be so impressive, so knowledgeable, so wise, and which is absolutely fine. But people don't align with us if we are just try to impress them. Once we are authentic, once we are open, once we are vulnerable about our stories, past, and our business, and sharing everything, the good, the ugly, the bad part, and everything in between, because entrepreneurship is not all about rainbows and butterflies. So I think it's really important to be authentic when we are guests on podcasts.
I love that. And helping your clients find their unique voice is one of the things that you do for them, correct?
Yes, correct. Finding that unique voice is crucial when it comes to podcast interviews. That's why we start our service with a strategy call when someone signs up with us. It's really important to go through everything, their topics, their bios, what kind of podcast we are targeting, and also their unique voice, like how we can approach these podcasts. And it's sometimes it takes time to find that unique voice, but that's why we are here.
And I love that you talk about authenticity and really diving into the reality of people want to hear the truth behind what you're doing. They want to dive into the nitty-gritty of it because that's where the lessons are learned. Let's face it, people come to podcasts to learn lessons. How am I going to manage life? How am I going to manage business? How am I going to manage, combining the two? So I think it's beautiful that you're helping people to step into being real and authentic when they are showing up on podcasts in the work that you do. So thank you for that. You shared that losing your business during the pandemic completely changed how you approached your work. What did starting over teach you about resilience?
Oh boy, yes. Starting over is part of the entrepreneurial life, and things can happen like anything. It can happen in your personal life, personal tragedies, or a pandemic. A pandemic could happen, and you start from scratch again. And being basically consistent and persistent, whatever you start doing, it's so crucial. And showing up every day, even when it's hard, when everything is completely brand new and you just starting out in a new space, in a new industry. I mean, that's what we did. It wasn't an easy ride. It was a very interesting journey. But then again, it opened up a whole new, different world to me. And I realized that I enjoy this so much more than what I've been doing before. So there's just finding the good things in every bad. It can happen and it will happen in our lives. And yes, you said like being resilient and being an entrepreneur, that's somehow connected in our lives, and we just keep going and keep showing up every day and doing those small steps just to reach our goals. I think it's crucial, and I would never change anything about what happened in the past, even if it was the pandemic and starting a new business. It helped me to become who I am today and created a completely new business and created amazing relationships with amazing people across the globe.
Hmm. And one of the things that you just said there, I think is beautiful. You said starting over is part of the entrepreneur life. Boy, is that true. Absolutely. So if this conversation is resonating with you, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the podcast with someone who may need this reminder today, because building visibility isn't really about being seen, it's about being remembered. And that's exactly why we are having these conversations here on the 30-Second Success podcast. So, Noemi, one thing you've learned is that people don't need to sound like everyone else. Why is uniqueness such a competitive edge?
Wow, that's a brilliant question. And I love that, Laura, because everybody wants to be kind of the same and don't stand out of the crowd, because that's the kind of the norm in the society. Because if we stand out, even as kids, we are the odd ones, and nobody really likes that. Nobody likes that feeling. But in the business world, you need to be unique and you need to stand out in some shape or form. Because if you think about just a podcast interview, how many podcast outreach you get, like guest outreach you get, like, weekly? I suppose you get a lot, like, from different podcast booking agencies or directly from the guests. And they are usually the same. And where they end up, usually in the spam folder or somewhere, or just a bin in your email. And I think it's really important to make your outreach as outstanding as possible and as unique as possible, because there are just too many people in this place. It's overcrowded with guests. So if you want to stand out, you have to make an effort. You have to do your homework. You have to listen to a few podcast episodes before reaching out to post, and not just sending generic podcast pitches, because those don't work anymore. The place is just crowded. Plus, we get all this AI approach, as well, the AI emails from everywhere. So the competition is big in this market.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because one of the biggest things, you're absolutely right, is actually you have something to say, and yet how do you help podcast hosts see that you're going to be able to bring value? And I think that's one of the things that you touch on in a lot of your conversations. And you and I've talked about that, is how do you deliver value? How can you show up as being helpful to the host? And that's really powerful in the work that you do. So how can entrepreneurs become more confident in sharing their stories and still deliver value at the same time?
I think it's important. I think it's really important, for example, to use social media in order to do that. Because what I noticed recently, that I got a lot of outreach from different podcast hosts to be a guest on their show because they were reading my LinkedIn post. They found them unique. They found them authentic. So in whatever way you can make yourself more authentic, please do so. Do it so. And one of the the great tools is social media. I know it's a love and hate relationship for most of the people because, yeah, it's a lot of work. I don't want to post about myself, but it is a marketing tool. It is free. It's out there, and we must use it in order to reach our goals again. It's like, I can't even imagine being an entrepreneur and not using social media. And I heard it from so many people that like, yeah, we're absolutely fine about social media. I don't need it. Yes, you need it. It's like, if you want to promote something, you need social media. It's like if you want to sell shoes, you need a shop or an online shop to do that, because otherwise nobody will know about your shoes you're selling. It's the same about being an entrepreneur. You need to have those spaces, and you need to stand out and share content. And it's connected with being a great guest as well, because that's how people notice you in the world. And that's how you get all these outreach from podcast hosts or potential business partners.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. Using social media really matters. And I think there's so much gold in using your podcast interviews for social media. It's very simple to actually share. Most podcast hosts will give you assets and images to use, and you just need to cut and paste. So I think there's
Yeah.
there's gold in being a podcast guest, because they're creating the assets for you most times. So you teach people how to become memorable podcast guests. What separates an average guest from an unforgettable one?
Oh, that's I love that question. Yeah, an average guest probably is not as prepared than as an unforgettable one. I think never wing a podcast interview, because that makes you unforgettable. Like, so many people just get on the show, they have no idea what the show about, they have no idea what the podcast host is doing, like in their business. And I think to do your research, to listen to at least one episode before the conversation is really important, because the host will know it if you are not prepared. And also be super clear about your own topics and about your own expertise and how to express that. And also being more a guide in your story, not a hero, because that's how people align with your message. That's also crucial. So getting prepared, being on time, being respectful with the host, listen to the host when, like, we are holding space for each other when we have a conversation. These are all the qualities that make a guest unforgettable.
I love that. Great. It's, just really sinking into it. You're absolutely right. Being prepared matters. I will tell you, I've made the mistake of winging it. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling when I didn't take the time to learn more about the guest, or more about the host, more about the podcast itself. And I got on there, and afterwards I was like, man, that could have been so much better. Right. The conversation could have gone but it was like one of those, I got invited. I didn't have time in between getting invited and actually
Yeah.
and being on there and being booked. So, sometimes I think that's a lesson in and of itself. If you're not prepared, you can lose an opportunity. And it was a great podcast. A lot of people listening to it may not have known that it wasn't my best, but I knew it. Afterwards, I was like,
Yeah.
my heart sank. I'm like, man, I could have said this, or I could have said that. And if I had thought a little bit more about how he engages with his audience, I could have been a little bit more comfortable. I think that's the thing. You can become more comfortable when you are more familiar with how a host runs a show. And I think that's really powerful advice that you've given us. So thank you for that. So how guests create value without sounding promotional? Because I've had that experience where I've had a couple of guests where I felt like the whole time they were with me, all they were doing was selling themselves.
Yeah.
And and when I've done in my previous podcast that I've done before starting this one, that was a struggle that I had to figure out how to get around leading somebody away from promoting themselves throughout the whole show.
Yeah. And it is a important discussion when it comes to podcast interviews, because many people still treat it as just a promotional space, but it is not. I mean, there's the host and the podcast, and they invite you into their house, quote unquote, on their show, where you can share your knowledge and story, and where you can educate and teach people. And that's the most important part, because once you just start to shamelessly just promoting yourself all the way along during the conversation, people will tune out, because that's not why they're here. That's not why they're listening to the show. So it's super important to understand there's always a space and time to promote your episode, because the host will always ask you where people to find you and what's your website and what's your social media link. And that's absolutely fine, but you have to wait for it. You are the guest. Literally, you are a guest somewhere. So you're not walking around and just advertising yourself. And podcasts are about, learning, about knowledge, about teaching. It's not just promotion.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that it just brought this story to my mind, I was really blessed. I have a very dear friend who has a podcast. It's a great podcast show. And I think I've been on his show 3 times now. When I first met him, I had no clue who he was. And I just, went on his show. He invited me on his show. I think it was through one of the podcasts, apps where you can connect with podcasters and be a guest. And at that time, I was just, saying, I'm a great podcast guest, but I did not want to be a podcast host at the time. So I showed up and we had great conversation, really connected. We stayed in touch. I did exactly what you're saying, stayed in touch. I actually, my second book, I asked him for a forward for my second book. My third book, asked him the same thing. So each time a new book came out, he asked me on the podcast. And I think by the third podcast, I flipped it around and I started interviewing him on his own show.
I love
that. So when you get comfortable with somebody and they start asking you back, you're absolutely right that when you start to bring value and start to help them and you stop promoting yourself, because he started talking about my book and everything else. I'm like, okay, let's turn this around. Let's start asking him about what he's up to and all that stuff. And it was fun because he was like, wait, how did this become about me? And he appreciated it. It was really fun to do. And just to have that relationship with him, that it became conversation. And it was almost like he forgot we were actually recording his podcast. So it was just fun. But you're absolutely right. When you stop making it about the promotion and start making it about the relationship, it just changes everything and becomes more powerful. So AI is changing how people create content and prepare for interviews. So how do you see AI impacting podcasting?
I think it's a curse and a blessing at the same time. It's a blessing. Let's start with the blessing part, because it's really important. It saves so much time for people, like for you, for us. We talked about this before the intro, how much time it saves us to edit the podcast, to create the show notes for the podcast host, and even just for the guests to prepare or to come up with their topic ideas. So it's a brilliant tool, but we still must think, because the thinking process, that's what actually disappearing when we use only AI. And I read different articles about it, even kids struggle with it because they forget to think. You don't need to, because you can write a 3-page essay without touching any books or searching for anything, in the internet. So it's really important for us, for entrepreneurs also, and for podcast guests to, yes, we can collect information. Yes, it can help us to prepare for anything and everything, but we still need to have our own opinions about things and our own thoughts. That's crucial, because AI can take over our brain. I mean, that's the whole point. Like, it can help us, but it's the essence of us being ourselves. It's still there. So I think it's that we have to be really careful in the future, and not to be too lazy to forget to think about things that we want to express.
Again, it's about, again, it is still about bringing yourself to the room
Yeah.
and it's showing up as your authentic self, being you. Nobody can replace that. AI can't replace that. You can deepen your expertise
Yes.
through AI and research and things like that. It's basically kind of like the research you would have done without AI, but now AI has just made it faster. I think one of the it just amazes me, and I love using AI. I feel like actually AI has given me the ability to think deeper. It's given me more time. It's given me the ability to reflect on things that are going on. But because to actually improve my communication skills at the same time.
Mm.
So how can entrepreneurs use AI to strengthen communications rather than replace it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And it's all about this continuous learning that we can do with AI. I think that's the most brilliant thing about it, because basically we can learn anything about anything and everything when we start using AI. And of course, we can go down on those rabbit holes too. But if we try to focus on, for example, if you are an entrepreneur and let's just say you're getting ready for your podcast interview, and you get some questions from the host that you are not sure how to answer, maybe you can run it through ChatGPT or any other AI tools that you're using, because obviously it's already trained and knows you very well, and can give you ideas and can improve those communication skills, because there are certain things that we don't even think about when we are preparing for an interview, for example, and it gives us so much help and knowledge. And for example, I'm not a native speaker, so sometimes it's a good thing for me to use AI just to get prepared. And also, for example, listening to a conversation before the intro, you listening to an episode. And if it's on YouTube, you can always run the transcript. And you can see what type of questions the host usually asks from the guests. So you can collect those, and that's amazing. So you can do all this very fascinating research before the interview starts. I'm kind of geeking out on this, but it's very uplifting and refreshing when it's like, oh, so these are the types of questions they usually ask, how the guests they usually reply. You learn so much from it. So if you are up for continuous learning in your life, and also at the same time improving your communication skills and language, it's the best place we can use right now, I think. And that's why it's AI is part of our life. It will be here, and let's just adapt ourselves and use it wisely.
Well said. I love it. So, do I mean before we wrap up, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share something directly with our audience. What's one piece of business advice you wish someone had shared with you?
It's about just basically keep going in life and in business. It's kind of my motto that I got it as an advice from my mentor, and that's how I try to live by, because we have good days, we have bad days, we have days that we don't want to work, but we always show up, we always keep going. And I truly, truly believe in the small steps approach when it comes to life and business, because we don't have to do everything on the same day and reach our goals in the first year of our business. And we need and we must develop patience with ourselves, with our business, with our clients. That's super important, because I remember at the beginning starting the business, you just want to reach all your goals and be rich and have those 4-hour work week and everything happening but it takes time, it takes work, it takes patience, and it takes courage to do everything you want to do. But be patient with yourself and try to keep going.
Hmm. Well said. Thank you. So, where can our listeners connect with you? How do you like to invite people into your world?
See, this is the promotion part. So
there you go.
There you go. It comes. It's always comes. So please, you can visit our website. It's podcastconnections, plural.co. That's our website. You can get in touch with us and let's jump on a call and connect. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm super active there. And just type my name in, Noemi Beres, and you can find a tiny microphone sign next to my name. That's me, and I'm happy to connect.
I mean, it has been so much fun hanging out with you, and I'm so grateful for our friend Amanda Solar for connecting us. She was absolutely right. You are a joy to hang out with and to have on the podcast, and I look forward to spending more time with you in the future. So, and you're welcome back here anytime to talk about podcasting.
Thank
I'd love
you.
to have
I
you on
appreciate that, Laura.
So, Noemi, one thing I really appreciated about this conversation is the reminder that meaningful communication isn't about having the perfect script. It's about showing up with authenticity, being willing to share your story, listening as much as you speak, and trusting that the right conversations can change the course of business and sometimes even a life. That's a lesson every communicator can carry forward. If today's conversation reminded you that your voice matters and that meaningful conversations create meaningful opportunities, I hope you'll carry this into your next networking event, your next podcast interview, and your next conversation. And if you're ready to strengthen your communication, clarify your message, build your confidence in your voice, and connect more authentically in business and in life, I'd love to invite you to join us in the Brand Success Hub. That's where Amy will be sharing a small training, a mini training on how to become a memorable podcast guest with our members. So the hub was designed for entrepreneurs, professionals, and communicators who are done second guessing themselves and ready to communicate with more clarity and compassion while learning practical strategies that actually work in real life. You can learn more at 30secondsuccess.com/hub. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs the reminder that one genuine conversation can open doors no sales pitch ever could. Until next time, stand in your brand, trust your voice, and remember, success is just 30 seconds away.